We are so excited to have Matthew Smith here to present to you. So even though Matthew is, or Dr. Smith is a associate professor at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, he started here at UIUC and graduated in 1998 with a BA in psychology. He actually went on to get his master's degree in social work right here at this very School of Social Work. Between then and now, Matthew's had a very busy and productive career. He went on to get his PhD at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and then did, get this, not one, but 2 postdocs. One at the Washington University in St. Louis in psychiatric epidemiology, and the other at Northwestern University. I first became aware of Matthew Smith in 2011 when my colleague at Northwestern saw him present virtual reality job interview training, and called me right away after his talk and said, "Oh my gosh, Judy, this would be great for foster youth." And since that time, I found out that VR-JIT is now being implemented in Chicago public schools with a study that Dr. Smith is conducting, and also at Thresholds. So this is a great opportunity for us to learn a little bit more about virtual reality job interview training. And Matt will also talk about some new applications for clinical training in social work that are pretty exciting for us too. So let's all welcome Dr. Matthew Smith.
Thanks, Judy, and thanks for the opportunity to talk here today. It's an honor to be involved in the first annual Harnessing Technology for Social Good seminar series. Today we're going to be talking about a couple of different aspects of virtual conversation training for both clients and clinicians. Okay, the clicker's not working. Oh, there we go. Just a few disclosures is that a lot of the research that we're talking about today was funded by the National Institute of Mental Health as well as the Kessler Foundation, and that Submersion is a private company that I partner with to work on these technologies, but currently I do not have a conflict of interest in working with them. And then here's just a brief outline of the talk today. And then more or less when we think of ways to train not only clients out in the field, but also clinical trainees, there are new and innovative ways to do that, and we're going to be talking about that here today. And some of that revolves around practical skill development and balancing sort of mock role plays or mock interviewing or role plays with peers on practicing clinical skill or evaluating clinical skill, and how we can innovate that practice with technology. So we know that there's a low employment rates for transition age youth with disabilities compared to their age peers, right? And so the data suggests that for those youth with disabilities 16 and 19 years old, they're only employed at a rate of 17% compared to 30% in their age peers, right? So there's quite a discrepancy there. And when they're 20 to 24 years old, they're employed at about 32% versus 65%. So again, that discrepancy really persists. And that data is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, job interviewing is a primary barrier to employment for these individuals for several reasons, one of which is just that a lot of youth with disabilities or adults with mental illness have difficulties navigating social interactions, right? It's part of the defining features of some of these disabilities. And really that translates into the job interview and really gaining access to employment. And so the job interview does present as a barrier because that is kind of the last hurdle to jump before you're able to obtain a job. Now, what's out there right now, right? So what type of interview training is available in the field? And primarily it's mock interview training, right? So whether it's youth or adults with mental illness or disabilities, you know, in their services, they may sit down with a vocational counselor and do a mock interview or two before they go on a real-life job interview. And what we know about this practice is it's not that effective at actually increasing skill. It does help with improving self-confidence, but by and large, I like to use the analogy of playing a musical instrument, right? So if you practice an instrument once or twice, can you go play a song in front of people, right, under the pressure of performing? right? So you need more than just practice, one or two tries at practicing before you can do that. And I like to think of the job interview as a concert of social skill, right? There's a lot of intricacies involved in that practice, and if you don't practice repeatedly with feedback, it's going to be really hard to build that skill. And so one way we can, there we go, fill this gap in services is that we work to develop virtual reality job interview training with funding from the National Institute of Mental Health. And this training was first built for adults with severe mental illness. And here are some of the design features of the tool. There's a virtual human resources character. It's individually customizable. There's core features for individuals with disabilities. We use hierarchical learning. There's an internal curriculum that you can learn what to do before, during, and after the job interview. There's also 3 levels of feedback, and as I mentioned, it's built for adults with severe mental illness. Now, this is just an outline, and we'll go over each of these features individually. So this is Molly. She is the human resources hiring manager for a fictional company called WonderSmart. And so Molly Porter's she's the star of the show, right? And she's a virtual hiring manager that you're going to practice interviewing with when you engage the tool. Now, Molly is an actual person that we recorded thousands of lines of dialogue and used a computer algorithm to really create this virtual character. And we used a kind of a matrix of 9 different variations of who Molly is. So it's more or less ease of personality by levels of difficulty. And more or less that way, in the real world, when you interview with somebody, you never know who you're going to interview with. You never know if that person's going to be engaging and helpful or friendly, or if that person's going to be kind of curt and tired and just doesn't want to really do any more interviewing. But as an interviewee, you need to be prepared for a range of different types of interviewers, and that's what Molly provides. And so here's the interface when working with Molly. So in the top left corner, you're going to see Molly, and in the bottom right corner of Molly's window, you're going to see Samantha, who's your nonverbal job coach, and I'll talk more about her in a moment. But the training interface is scripted. There's 10 to 15 responses to each of Molly's questions, and they range in effectiveness from something that's highly effective that's going to help your interview with Molly and build rapport to statements that are very ineffective and that are going to hurt rapport with Molly. And as a trainee, it's up to you to decide what you would like to say, and then you're going to get feedback on your response. Now, these scripts were all built by individuals who have decades of experience in vocational rehabilitation and employers, right? That this is their lived experience are interviewing. And so they're the ones that contributed to writing these scripts. So I mentioned the tool is individually customizable. So before you interview with Molly, you actually fill out a job application and get practice filling out a job application. And then your answers on that job application actually inform the algorithm that is Molly. And so Molly will know what is on that job application. So in the back, we can go ahead and play this video.
I see from your application that you're interested in customer service. Have you worked in customer service in the past?
In addition, I mentioned there's core features. So asking for accommodations, disclosing one's diagnosis. Now, disclosure isn't something that we advocate that folks should do. It's a personal choice, primarily because the literature is really mixed on this. But if it's something somebody wants to do, the tool can help them learn how to do that. In addition, the tool can help folks discuss gaps in their work history, a prior criminal conviction, and the relevance of their military training for a community-based job. We also use hierarchical learning, right? So there's three levels of difficulty: easy, medium, and hard. At the easy level, Molly's very friendly. Go ahead and play the friendly video. Oh, we lost our sound. So basically what happens is on easy, Molly says, "Hi, I'm Molly. Thanks for coming in. It's really nice to meet you. What can you tell me about yourself?" So she uses a really pleasant demeanor. And then on business, at the medium level, go ahead and try that video. Okay, so we lost that too. So Molly says, "Hi, I'm Molly Porter. We spoke on the phone. I have many interviews today, so let's get down to business," right? So she has much more of a professional demeanor, right? So in addition, there's also a curriculum. So before you even engage in the interview practice, there's an entire curriculum built out that you can learn more about the job application, creating a resume, getting ready for the interview, what to do on the interview, and what to do after the interview. And this is all text-based, written at a 6th grade reading level. And it's pretty hard to digest, and I'll be the first person to say that. And with some funding to help make this more accessible for transition age youth, we actually made major modifications to this. But right now, for the adult version of the tool, it is in kind of paragraph form. And there's also 8 learning goals. So in addition to learning kind of how to behave on an interview, there's kind of targets, right, that you want to do well during your interview performance, such as coming across as an honest employee, dependable, displaying teamwork, being professional, showing interest in the position, right? Who goes on a job interview and kind of seems disinterested in the job? Someone like that is probably not going to get hired. You want to come across as you're really interested in working for this company. So I mentioned Samantha. So there's 3 levels of feedback, the first of which is Samantha. She's your nonverbal job coach. So every time you respond to Molly's questions, Samantha gives you a big thumbs up and a smile, or kind of a thumbs down and a frown. And so she gives you that immediate nonverbal feedback as to whether your response was helpful or hurtful. Now, level 2 is you get scripted feedback. Now, every time you interview with Molly, or every time you answer one of Molly's questions, you're going to get immediate feedback on whether what you said was helpful or hurtful, and advice about how to do better on each individual statement. So there's actually a living transcript with the tool. And this is just an example of what that transcript looks like. And it's color-coded, so if your feedback is in green, that means you did well, kind of go. And if the feedback is colored in red, then it's kind of like stop, that's inappropriate or unhelpful or hurtful to rapport. And so this is just an example. So this is a response to Molly's question. The interviewee said, I've been given advice about a couple different things. Most of the advice was pretty bad, so I ignored it, right? So you don't want to really frame things in a negative light during a job interview. And so the feedback you received was, this makes you look like you can't take criticism, and that makes you look hard to work with. So at the end, after you interview with Molly, you get a score from 0 to 100. And that score is based on your learning goals, such as being professional and making a good impression, or a couple more of those learning goals we talked about. And here you get a numerical score as well as high-level feedback on each of those performance goals. So that said, we created Molly, and then we spent some time evaluating Molly. And so we were lucky enough to have funding to evaluate Molly across 5 randomized controlled trials that targeted youth with young adults on the autism spectrum, military veterans with PTSD, individuals with mood disorders, adults with schizophrenia, and adults that were fighting addiction. So in those 5 different cohorts, just sharing some of our results. So this is their performance in these efficacy trials. And just as a moment of education, so in a lab-based setting, the first thing you do when you evaluate an intervention is you want to evaluate that intervention under ideal conditions, and that's considered efficacy, right? If an intervention seems to work in a lab, then it's efficacious. And then from the lab, you move an intervention out into the real world, and that's where you study whether the intervention's effective. So these are all efficacy trials. But essentially what we see is across easy, medium, and hard, we see that our participants or our trainees improve their scores with Molly over time. Now what this does is it actually translates into our outcomes. So before and after, like our pre-test and post-test, when measuring job interview skill, we had our participants complete mock interviews with an actor, 2 mock interviews pre and 2 mock interviews post, and we rated them along the same lines as the Molly tool, those 8 learning goals, right? And so what we see here is that the raters who were blinded to group condition identified that the trainees using Molly were actually more skilled at post-test compared to the controls. And we also see both groups improve their self-confidence, but as I mentioned, the standard practice in the field is a mock interview. So actually our primary outcomes were measured by actually giving them the standard practice in the field. So it's not, it's not unexpected to see that additional self-confidence improve, but it's to a greater degree in the Molly trainees. And we see the same pattern of results in our adults with autism. Now, 6 months later, we had to ask ourselves, are these folks getting jobs, right? That's the most important thing here is we might be improving skill, but does that translate to a community-based job? And what the data suggests is that for those in both types of groups, that at 6 months, the Mosley trainees were twice as likely to obtain a job compared to the control group. In addition, the Mosley trainees, the more trials or more interviews they completed with Mosley, which on average was about 15, and an interview with Mosley took about 20, 25 minutes, the more trials that they completed, the fewer weeks until they were able to obtain that employment. So we also found that the job interview skills were actually a mechanism for employment. So in this model, what we found was that the number of interviews actually predicted post-test skill performance during the role plays, which in turn predicted receiving a job offer. So that was really nice to see that as we expected, or as we hypothesized, that training with Mosley improved your skills, which helped you get a job. So where did that take us? So basically where that took us is we are now evaluating the effectiveness of Mosley out in the field with funding from the National Institute of Mental Health. I was able to receive an R01 from NIMH to basically take Mosley and add Mosley to individual placement and support services, which is the gold standard of vocational rehabilitation service out in the field. It's the highest quality voc rehab service that's available in the country. And we basically added Mosley to that to see if that can help boost outcomes. And so we basically began with a lab model through discussion with our community advisory board. And essentially what we found was that that was a little bit difficult to do because the lab was geographically centralized and some of our participants were traveling up to an hour on public transportation to get there. So that just didn't work. So we had to take Mosley mobile, which means we put Mosley on a laptop and took the Mosley directly to the clients in the field. Here's some of the sample characteristics, but I just wanted to draw your attention to, even though this is randomized, we still found some group differences. Essentially, we see that the Mosley trainees are about 15 years older than the control group, or the IPS-only group, and that we also see that at baseline, the BDI, or the Beck Depression Inventory, was a bit higher in the control group. But that said, even though it was a bit higher, a score of 13 on the Beck Depression Inventory is still a very mild level of depression. So qualitatively, the groups didn't differ that much. And then here's something else that's important to identify is that our control group had a higher rate of employment within the past 2 years. And in the field, prior employment is one of the strongest predictors of future employment, or recent employment, I should say. And so therefore, we might expect that the IPS-only group may have a better chance of getting a job in the future because they more recently had a job. So what does the effect look like out in the field? So some of this basically suggests that we're still seeing improvements in job interview role play skill in our Mosley trainees that are receiving this within IPS services compared to the controls, right? And so that's really consistent with what we saw in the lab. We're seeing it in the field. In addition, this is something we didn't see in the field or in the lab because we didn't assess it, but we're seeing that there's a decrease in interviewing anxiety for our Mosley trainees. And this decrease translates for the scientists in the room to about a 0.7 effect size decrease in interviewing anxiety, which is a pretty strong effect. And so that's what we're seeing right now in our interview trainees. In addition, we see that same kind of boost in self-confidence that we saw before. So that's still consistent with our prior research in the lab. And here's our 6-month employment rate within IPS. And so right now we're still seeing that the Mosley trainees within 6 months are getting employed about half the time. And then within IPS we see a much lower statistic, about half what we saw in the controls in the efficacy studies. And more or less, this data is a bit inconsistent with IPS as a whole. So IPS as a whole, at their 12-month follow-up, which is largely what they report in the literature, the employment rates are around 50%, right? And at 12 months. And so what we're seeing is we're able, with the Mosley training, to achieve that by 6 months. And we still see that the IPS-only group has some ways to go to hit that mark, right? Now, in addition, we also evaluated the cost effectiveness of Mosley. And this is some preliminary data, but essentially what we did was we collected, 34 weeks of data from 13 staff. And these staff are separated into staff who have trainees on their caseload versus staff that don't have Mosley trainees on their caseload. Does that make sense? And so what we're seeing here is that for staff that have Mosley on their caseload, is we're seeing about, a half hour per week less of job interview training. We're seeing about an hour and a half less of working on job application skills, because our thinking is that they're getting this training through Mosley, so that's taking the burden off the employment specialists in the IPS model, and that could be translating into more time spent on administration. So those with Mosley trainees on their caseload are actually performing about 2.5 hours more per week of administrative work. So some of those take-home points are that it seems that in the field, trainees have still are maintaining greater interview skill. They're less anxious about interviewing, greater self-confidence, are more likely to get jobs by 6 months, kind of very similar to what we saw in the lab. And there may be increased efficiency in the employment specialists. And then future trials, we want to focus on more of the implementation evaluation through different strategies to deliver Mosley out in the field. So that said, since Mosley seems to have strong efficacy data and some effectiveness data in adults, we wanted to see, hey, what will Mosley do for youth? And we were able to get some funding to do that. So I submitted a grant to the Kessler Foundation out of New Jersey, where their primary focus is to help individuals with disabilities find employment, right? It was a very perfect match for the type of work that we're doing. And essentially, I was able to partner with the Illinois Secondary Experiential or Transitional Experience Program, or STEP, and STEP allowed us access to their network of schools. STEP is a program that provides grants to schools to fund and support transitional services for youth with disabilities across the state of Illinois. The STEP network has more than 10,000 students, or approximately 10,000 students, in about 600 schools. And in addition, so the first year that I worked with this particular project, we focused on our relationships with STEP, and it just took me a bit more time, but eventually I was able to partner with Chicago Public Schools. So currently we're delivering Mosley within Chicago Public Schools, but I don't have any data there yet because we're actually in the middle of that delivery process. And here are the sample characteristics of the students that we've delivered to so far. So we've delivered Mosley to about 300, a little less than, but about 300 students with a range of different disabilities, as you can see in the table. The overall demographics are very similar to Illinois as a state overall, and we were pretty much spread out across the state overall. We had schools as far south as Granite City and as far north as Rockford. So we were pretty spread out using the STEP network. And then as central as Bloomington, and we did partner with Champaign County as well. So essentially what we see here is that by 6 months after training with Mosley, students that completed just 1 to 5 interviews with Mosley were employed at 26%. Students that completed 6 to 14 interviews with Mosley were employed at 34%. And students that completed that magical 15 interviews with Mosley or more, they were employed at 44%. By 6 months. And 75% of the students reported, just kind of self-reported, yes, Mosley helped with my skill and my confidence. And only about 8% of students reported that Mosley was difficult to work with. Some factors that I also thought were important to share is that the teachers and administrators reported that Mosley wasn't disruptive to class. The teachers and administrators are motivated to continue using Mosley, and they feel equipped to do so. And so when we kind of take away, our takeaway at this point is that Mosley seems to be working in schools. And you may remember that I mentioned Mosley was created at a 6th grade reading level. Even though Mosley was created at a 6th grade reading level, our students, at least 15 to 20% of them, were reading at a 4th or a 5th grade reading level. So we did open it up for readers that weren't as strong as what the tool was built for, but we provided additional support by updating Mosley so that instead of having to read everything, students could listen and then model what they were hearing. But that said, the way Mosley was built, it was designed for adults with severe mental illness, right? And I was lucky enough that an RFA at NIMH came out that said, we want to develop services for transition age youth with autism. And I said, great, I have the perfect tool that we can adapt to do that. And it took me 3 tries, but eventually I got there and I received funding to modify Mosley to meet the needs of transition age youth with autism. And then I kicked in some additional funds so that the training wasn't just meeting the needs of youth with autism, but educational disabilities more generally. Now, in order to make that modification, I basically recruited 24 transition age youth and 21 adult stakeholders to play with the Mosley tool, see what the Mosley tool is all about, and then tell us, what would you like to change about Mosley? And then we took that information to a community advisory board to kind of help us sift through the real primary points that we had to implement to make those changes. And essentially, here's a highlight of a few of those changes. And essentially, we wanted to do shorter interviews. Even though the interviews were 20 to 25 minutes with adults, they were 30 to 35 minutes with youth because they were reading more slowly. And there was a lot of options, 10 to 15, right? So to accommodate that change, we now only have up to 8 options to choose from. And it's written at a 4th grade reading level. So we heard our participants loud and clear. In addition, we have greater diversity in the interviewing. So before, obviously, Molly's a Caucasian female. Now we have 2 interviewers, one who is an African-American male and one who is Latina. And so we really kind of committed to that diversity. Now, we also needed more social storytelling. Right? Before, it was just sort of like this thing where you log in and then you interview, but we wanted to make it a more immersive experience and more social for the youth. And so we added that as a component. In addition, we created greater scaffolding in the learning goals. Before, we had 10 learning goals, or 8 learning goals, and at easy, there was 8 learning goals. At medium, there were 8 learning goals, and at hard, there were 8 learning goals. Now with the scaffolding at easy, we have 4 learning goals, so there's not as much information that we're trying to pack into the students' learning. And then we add 3 on for medium, so now there's 7 learning goals at medium, and then at hard, there are now 10 learning goals at hard. So we created that greater scaffolding. So overall, now that we've created a new version of Mosley, we are now evaluating the new version. And so our 2 new interviewers are Rita and Travis, who you're going to meet here shortly, and Kendra, who's now our social storyteller. So before there was Samantha, who gave you the nonverbal cues. Kendra does that now, but Kendra also provides you with more of an immersive experience. She's sort of like your job coach buddy, and she creates more of a social component to the tool. And so we're evaluating this in an RCT, supported by the funding from the National Institute of Mental Health. And we're also evaluating this tool in an open trial where all students are getting access, and this is what we're currently doing with CPS, as well as the STEP network. And so I'm going to list some future directions, but basically, as we move forward outside of schools, we want to make this type of intervention available to youth aging out of foster care, low-income youth with low social capital, and we're also looking to deliver and evaluate the delivery of these tools in justice-involved populations, so not only adults but also juveniles. And what we would like to do now is a demonstration of the tool. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of go back and we're going to bring up the new version of the youth tool, and we'll kind of walk through a few things so everyone can see it. Do you know if the sound's going to come back on?
Just like check the volume up and down just to see if we hear like the feedback.
Yeah, so it's there. That looks good. I mean, it's doing supposed to. Okay.
Can I just do this real quick?
Yeah.
It says it's muted. Or it says we're not getting any audio. That's the
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's fine now.
Welcome to Job Interview Training, the program that lets you practice your interview skills. I'm Kendra, and I'm here to help you. I work here at WonderSmart, the made-up department store where you want to work. They're opening a new store in your area, and they have a lot of different kinds of jobs you can apply for. There are 3 main parts to this program. The first one is called Interview Basics. That's where you'll go to learn how to find places that are hiring, things to do to get ready for an interview, what kinds of things to say during an interview, and things to do after you're done interviewing. You can read this information in any order you want. There's lots of good information in here, so take your time going through it. If you need help, click the play button next to the words, and I'll read the information to you. The second part of this training lets you fill out an application form like the ones you may do online. There are tips and hints in there that will help you learn what some of the questions mean and what kind of information you should enter. You can practice the application as many times as you want. You can even print it so a friend, teacher, or family member can look at it with you. The third part of the program lets you practice the interview. WonderSmart has 2 people doing the interviews for the new store, Ms. Rita Muniz and Mr. Travis Bishop. So you'll probably have the chance to interview with both of them. Before you talk to them, you can review the list of things they're looking for in a new hire. Then during the interview, they'll ask you questions about yourself and the job you want. Listen carefully to their questions and choose what you want to say by speaking your response into the microphone or clicking on it. I'll be with you the whole time to give you clues on how you're doing. When you finish the interview, you'll get a score on each of the things Ms. Muniz and Mr. Bishop were looking for. I'll tell you what each score means and what you can do differently the next time. You can also look at the whole interview or just parts of it to see what went well and find areas where you can do better next time. Plus, you'll earn tokens based on your score. When you get enough tokens, you'll level up and the interviews will get a little harder. You can also trade in those tokens for chances to ask me questions about myself and what I like to do. Remember, it takes time to get good at interviews, so you can practice as many times as you want. Each time you practice, it will be like you're interviewing for the first time. So you'll have a new chance to impress Ms. Muniz or Mr. Bishop and get a job working with me at WonderSmart. Good luck.
So that's the introduction that all the students will get to see, or trainees will get to see when they log into the tool. And it's as simple as going to the website, using your username and password, and logging right in. And then you can launch the tool. From here, what I'll do is I'll show you the interview basics, or basically this is the educational curriculum. And we'll just show a few highlights here. And so, for example, what you see is that in the other version, you may have noticed that it's kind of this long, bulky paragraph format, which is really hard to digest, right? But here, it's brief sentences, more bullet point format, more visual, and again, here more bullets. And then the interview, we can look at some general tips. Again, trying to make it more accessible for youth in transition. And then just to give you some insight into what the application looks like. So basically, this is just an overview we can apply at WonderSmart. We have to kind of create a new name, and I'll just sort of create it. And then essentially, here's our application. And what you'll see here that's really great for individuals trying to learn how to fill out a job application is this tips and advice box. So for example, first name. Some of the advice you get about a first name, I guess you don't really need to see my home address, but the advice for the first name is basically you want to put down your legal name. You don't want to use a nickname, things like that. And so this is consistent across. So your employment history, if that's something that you want to do, and your personal information, such as your educational background. And these are things that, that Rita and Travis will know when you fill it out. This information will go into the algorithm. And then from here, what we can do is, okay, I have really good eyesight, but not that good. And then we come back here to the application page, and then we can click on the interview button where we can access our interview with Rita or Travis, where it says interview now. But before we get there, one thing we can do is we can click on this link for Kendra, your coach, and then you'll get some insight into each of the nonverbal cues that she's going to demonstrate. And all of this is accompanied with videos to introduce you to this information.
I'll be with you to help you while you're interviewing. You'll see me on the screen giving you clues on how you're doing. Then, after each question, you'll be able to see in writing what the interviewer asked and what you said back. Your answers will be color-coded, so you will quickly know how well you did. You can also read about what the interviewer was hoping to hear.
Just as a demo, and for sake of time, we'll just cut that a little short. But so in addition to having Kendra tell you more about her cues, there's also the learning goals for this version of the tool. And again, there's Kendra here to help support you in what you want to learn.
Ms. Muniz and Mr. Bishop are the interviewers for WonderSmart. They're going to ask you a lot of questions to find out if you're the right person for the job they have.
And so these learning goals are categorized in 3 areas. Are you someone that they want to work with? So coming across as confident, positive, being professional. Again, there's a video with Kendra to support that. And then if we want to see more about being positive, for example.
The interviewers want to hear all of the good things about you and why they should hire you for the job. So, every time they ask you a question, think to yourself, how can I answer this question and tell them something good about myself? So
again, it's just some advice about how to navigate through the interview. And so we can go back here and then interview now. And your rewards are about the tokens that Kendra talked about. And so we'll talk a bit about more of that after we demo the interface. So this brings us to easy, medium, or hard. So as Kendra mentioned, that after you interview enough, you're going to level up, so to speak, and interviews will get harder. So there is a concrete system in place that trainees cannot access medium or hard until they've kind of met the criteria at easy. And so since I've met criteria at all three are available to me. So at easy, kind of that basic engagement part of the interview, there really aren't any other options other than to just dive right in. At medium, you get to choose your position at WonderSmart and upload your application so Molly can see it. In terms of looking for a position, here are the different positions. It's a little far away, but basically there's vocational related positions, customer related positions, technical positions, and things related to merchandise. So overall there's 14 positions. You can think of WonderSmart as like a Costco or a Sam's Club with all the different areas for employment.
Click here to begin.
My name's Travis Bishop. I'll be conducting your interview today. I have many people to interview today, so let's get down to business.
Oh, thanks. And so as you can see, so this is the medium level of difficulty, and as I kind of demonstrated during the medium Molly or the business Molly, we just met business Travis, right? And this is interesting because Judy has already sat on 3 of these presentations, and every time Travis has been friendly. So this is the first time Judy got to see a business Travis. So typically what I do is I just engage the audience. What would you like me to say to Travis?
None of those options?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for the chance to interview today.
Chance to interview today.
Just to let you know, the new store is on track to open in a month, and some of the new hires may start training before that.
It did take you guys forever to get started.
What can you tell me about yourself?
So you just said something that's negative, and now Travis is now disengaging from the interview, right? And remember, there's 9 different versions of Travis, so if he starts off a little rough, it might be hard to kind of, if you say something wrong, it might be hard to kind of win him back over, right? And so this is the whole purpose of this whole process, right, is to give our trainees exposure to different personalities, different ways to get through that interview. And it may be that you could say every good thing there is to say, and Travis, it just may be really hard to win over this time around. But the next time you interview with Travis, he just may be a delight. So there's a lot of variability there.
Forget it. Do you have any questions before we start?
So he asked a question, and I clicked, I don't know. And so I don't know how long this interview is going to go. All right, this will be a good one.
When do I start?
You haven't been offered a job yet. Why don't you wait for an offer before you get excited?
Darn. I got really excited for a moment.
What made you apply to WonderSmart?
I don't know. You were hiring.
What do you think your greatest weakness is?
So as you can see, Kendra up in the corner, kind of giving that thumbs down. And so for sake of time, what we'll do is we'll kind of end the interview with Travis.
How much longer is this going to take?
I don't want to waste any more of your time. Let's just end things here.
And what we see, so here's our overall assessment. Well, Travis, did we get the job?
At this time, your answers do not qualify you to work at WonderSmart. Keep practicing, and maybe next time we'll be able to offer you a job.
And then this is our assessment on how well we did in each of the learning goals. Yeah, so we see a lot of red there, right? And our overall score is 13 out of 55 for this piece. But you're getting that higher level of feedback on how to improve in each of these areas. Are you a good worker? Okay, well, we didn't do very well here either. And then, we're at medium, so there's only these two different groups of assessment. At hard, there would be a third group as well. And then if we want, now that we're done, we can look at our transcript on everything that we said with Travis and look at all the different feedback. You can actually even hear yourself talk out loud to Travis. So I've been clicking, but there's a microphone in the top right corner that you can click, and then you can speak all of these responses. And that's our encouragement. We always want our trainees to speak to the hiring managers. And then if we want, we can click New Play. And then it'll bring us right back here to easy, medium, and hard. So then what I'll do is I'll quit, and then it'll bring us back here, and then our rewards. So rewards, every point you score on easy towards that 100, you get a token. On medium, you get 2 tokens per point, and on hard, you get 3 tokens per point. And then you can cash these in to talk to Kendra. And then you can ask Kendra for advice. You can try to get to know her a little bit. It's really just some social effectiveness training. And at this time, we actually even had teachers use these tokens in the real world setting. So for a student that earned X number of tokens, the teachers allowed the students to wear their hat in class. So they built those real world reinforcements based on the technology. And talking to Kendra, the interface is pretty much, and just for sake of time, we won't go there, but talking to Kendra, it's the same sort of interface with Travis. It's just that then you're talking to Kendra and you can ask her questions. There it goes. Let's show. Okay, so now we're going to move into a different area. As I mentioned, we also have these tools to train clinicians. And right now, I had the opportunity to, kind of quote unquote borrow some of these tools from my technology partner. But basically, I was able to license them with the help of our school of social work to pilot the delivery of them and a little bit of an evaluation with our social work students that were taking my interpersonal practice for adults class. So there's actually a suite of these sorts of simulations for motivational interviewing, cognitive behavioral therapy, SBIRT. There's even trainings around giving somebody performance feedback, so like field instructors can use some of this. So here's Gabe Turner. Now, what's his name? So there's actually some video that we can play here. Oh no. So basically, Gabe is telling you that he doesn't understand why he's here today. He came into the doctor to see somebody because he hurt his knee at work. And when he saw the physician, he filled out an audit. And essentially what happened was he scored high on the audit, and the physician referred him to see you, the social worker. So your job is to use motivational interviewing to kind of engage him around his alcohol use. And there's a few different versions of Gabe, one where he is sort of open to hearing from you. There's versions of Gabe where he's very resistant to talking about any sort of drinking behavior. And there's kind of a version in the middle. But basically, it's designed to be a brief intervention. And the interface looks very similar. It's something you've seen before. So basically, instead of having Travis there or Kendra, you now have Gabe there. And just like the interview tool had a curriculum around job interviewing, this tool has a curriculum around motivational interviewing, focusing, engaging, evoking, ORs, all these core components of motivational interviewing. And so I use this with my students and as part of our design for class. And so we had 22 students in class, and this are the results that we saw from the students. Basically, students needed 14 trials to obtain at least 90% one time, right? And basically, it was pretty tough. And one trial with Gabe could take 15 minutes. So you can do the math on 14 times, a quarter of an hour. Their average starting score was about 63%. And that's good because if they started at around 90%, then that tells us the tool is not a very good tool, right? But by them starting at such a low percentage, we know there's a lot of room to improve their skills. Their average high score was just about 90%. And really what that means is there were a couple of students that used it enough where they still weren't able to obtain a 90%. We actually had 2 students have 27 sessions with Gabe, and one student, they just liked to do it, and the other student couldn't get the 90. And so just kind of speaks a bit to that it is a difficult tool to use, and that's a good thing when we're talking about training clinicians. In terms of preparedness, so 64% of the students felt very prepared to engage via ORs, and 27% felt somewhat prepared. 60% felt very prepared to use evoking skills, 41% somewhat. About 60% were very likely to recommend Gabe to others, and 36% were somewhat likely to recommend Gabe to others. But overall, more than 90% felt prepared, very or somewhat, to use motivational interviewing after using the tool. And here's some student feedback. Gabe was very difficult for me. However, I liked it because it gave me a reality check that I have a lot more work to do on my MI skills. I thought Gabe was very realistic and helped me form a better understanding of MI techniques that would easily translate into my practice. Here's Tanisha Mosley. Hopefully the audio will work this time. If not, we'll make it through. So it doesn't look like the audio is working, but she just introduces herself as Tanisha Mosley. She's got a husband that just doesn't get it. And sometimes when she comes home from work, she likes to have a drink. Except now drinking's become a problem, and it's our job to introduce CBT to her. And so CBT is a general psychotherapy skill set. So if you're learning CBT to treat alcohol or depression or so on and so forth, there's still a core component of CBT that's generalizable. For these particular simulations, they're focused around alcohol. But essentially, she's just letting you know that even though you're practicing to introduce CBT to her, she has very different personalities, but every time you talk to her, it'll be like it's for the first time. So Tanisha's not going to know it's you, and every time you talk to her, it's going to be a new experience because she's going to be a very different Tanisha. And every time you talk to her, you could say of different things that'll take you in a different direction because it's sort of the same algorithm that drives the characters. And that algorithm is basically everything you say informs the way the progression of the conversation takes place. Does that make sense? Yeah. So here's Roger Ellison. So kind of the same situation. He's kind of at a party with his wife, and he's drank too much, and he basically needs help because she's going to leave him. And it's our job to go over a functional analysis of his behavior with him. So here's some general student feedback. I liked how the trainings really emphasized developing a rapport, and they were useful tools to help me see my strengths and challenges. And then the simulation is currently being implemented at the University of Michigan School of Social Work. We have 316 students that are actively using the simulation. There's been more than 60,000 minutes dedicated to using the simulation so far. And we have 8 different simulations at the school. And everybody now has their own access to these simulations here. So as part of our demonstration today, the company who owns the rights to all of these simulations were generous enough to give everybody kind of 60 trials to spread around the different simulations to see if you like them or to see if it's something you want to kind of use. We have 15 faculty teaching clinical courses, and there's already been more than 1,000 minutes by faculty in terms of preparing to use these simulations. So that said, I want to thank everybody for their attention today. I really appreciate the chance to come here to UIUC. It's been a long time since I've been back, and it's been a delight, and I can't thank the university and the School of Social Work enough for having me here, and to Judy for hosting me the last couple of days, so thank you so much. And I believe we still have a few time, some time for questions.
Anybody have any questions for Dr. Smith?
Yes.
I know one of the questions that came up for me at first, what is the support that they could potentially offer more job training once they're in the position?
Mm-hmm.
Run those social skills.
Sure. That's a great question, and it's a question I get every time I do this presentation. Interview training is great, like you help them get a job. Now what, right? And so I've taken that question to heart, and my background before I got into intervention work and interview skills was actually around the social cognitive deficits and schizophrenia. And so even at that time, I had my wheels turning, how can we improve social skills? And so I already have grant submissions that are under review, and actually it's getting reviewed this week with my technology partner to take this type of engine and apply it to training individuals to have more effective conversations with coworkers, customers, and supervisors. And so that's going to be a fully built out, it's going to take more than $1 million to create this tool, and that's what's next. So it's a great question.
Integration with, human doing job training around that?
Yeah, so I see these tools as an enhancement to existing services. But to some degree, somebody could access them and improve their skills on their own. But I wholeheartedly support that. These are small pieces in the big picture, right? That we do need that human-to-human interaction, and these are ways to help facilitate that. Yes.
This is probably a bigger question you have time for, but if you could say a few words about your tech partner. So, to what extent did you, were you involved in the design and the technical?
Sure. Yeah, so I serve more as the content expertise or more of the visionary with some aspects, but it's very much a mutual partnership. And so when we designed the social skills thing that's under review right now, it was very much we were all together brainstorming about what this could look like. And that took years of trying to figure out what is this going to look like. So it's very much a mutually beneficial partnership. And I think that finding a partner like Submersion is not so easy because they're tremendous in their partnership. And in a lot of partnerships, it could be where one side has kind of more power than the other, or they may not care as much, especially if it's a big company, like you just may be a little cog trying to fit into their big machine. Submersion's a smaller company, but they care. And they care just as much as you do to help people and to create these tools in order to help people. And so it's been a really great partnership. And I would say that I'm more of a content matter expert, and they are absolutely 100% like the technology gurus that kind of make this stuff work.
We probably have time for one more question. Does anyone from the audience have a question for Dr. Smith?
Yes.
Will this can be promoted to homeless people?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I think that we would want to try to get this type of technology in the hands of whoever needs it. Even though we've done a lot of our research in adults with severe mental illness or youth with disabilities, I've done this work for a long time now, and I think these are the kinds of tools that can help anybody. And I think In terms of the accessibility, it's really finding the right way to deliver them and the partner who's willing to deliver them. So absolutely, we would be happy for that to happen, and it's finding the right mechanism to make it happen.
All right, everyone. This has been a great learning experience for all of us, very stimulating.